Have you ever been asked this in a job interview? Tell me about a time when you didn't agree with your boss. What would you say? This is what's called a behavioral interview question, and it's a common tactic. Employers use this kind of question to explore your fit for a job based on your past experience. It can be an easy question to answer if you have the right strategy. I show you how to answer these gotcha questions in our free Max List guide, 100 Behavioral Interview Questions You Need to Know. To get your copy, visit maxlist.org/questions. You'll also learn 4 simple steps for answering any behavioral interview question. Again, that's maxlist.org/questions. You can count on getting these questions in your next interview. Why not get the answers before you walk into the interview room? Go to maxlist.org/questions. This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm your host, Mac Pritchard. I'm also the founder of Max List. It's a job board in the Pacific Northwest that helps you find a fulfilling career. Every Wednesday, I talk to a different expert about the tools you need to get the work you want. After listening to Mark Crossfield last week, you know the career change myths you need to ignore. But how do you choose your new career? Kathy Oneto is here to talk about how to answer the question, what do you want to do next? She's a consultant, facilitator, and coach. Kathy also hosts the Sustainable Ambition podcast, and she has a new book coming out. Sustainable Ambition, How to Prioritize What Matters to Thrive in Life and Work. Kathy joins us from San Francisco. Well, let's get going, Kathy. Let's start with a basic question. Why is it important to know what you want to do next in your career?
Let me answer this by saying what often happens instead in terms of what do you want to do next. What can often happen is that it's really easy for us to go on autopilot and kind of lose ourselves in the process of managing our careers. But that can often lead to us ending up in a destination we don't intend or a place where we might not be happy with where we are when we arrive there. And so it's kind of like we've handed over controls to somebody else to make these decisions for us. And 2 other just quick things that can happen often is that we don't adjust to changing circumstances. So we may not be paying attention to how are we feeling? Are we starting to sense that we are, wanting something new or starting to get dissatisfied or unmotivated with where we are? And we often need to take action on that sooner than we think. And then the third thing is that it's not uncommon for us to hit periods of turbulence and not know how to react. So if we haven't ever been thinking about in recent times, like, oh, what might be next for me, we can end up in these situations that are really unsettling and kind of throw people off.
What difference can having a clear direction and answer to that question, what do you want to do next, make when you're doing a job search?
Well, knowing what you want to do next allows you to be in the driver's seat, to really drive your career with better alignment so you can really end up feeling more satisfied and fulfilled in your career, rather just aligning to what shows up in front of you. Oftentimes people think that their company owns their career, and we forget that we own our career, that we really need to be in that driver's seat. And what's really powerful about that when you're in job search mode is that it really gives you more conviction and confidence in your search. And also when you're in interviews and as you go to sell yourself for a particular role that you might be really interested in. And so it allows you to tell, I believe, a more cohesive and also compelling story when you're in those conversations, when you've been able to connect the dots to say, here's what I have been doing, and here's what I want to do next, and here's why.
In your experience, Kathy, can employers tell the difference if they've got 2 finalists for a job and one is clear about what the person wants to do next and the second candidate is uncertain? Is that apparent to hiring managers?
Personally, I believe it is. I think that we also ourselves can sense it and can feel it. And I'll just admit, Mac, I've found myself in this position. And that's part of like my own learning journey has been when I've been uncertain and I've gone into conversations, I am not sitting in a place of confidence and conviction and telling my story in a compelling kind of way or in a really convincing way. And I do believe that those on the other side, those that are hiring, can sense that. And I think you can tell the difference between somebody who is really, deeply interested, has an understanding of where they're going, how they're going to be engaged in that role versus someone who's not really that convicted about what this role is for them.
And in your experience, how do hiring managers react to that uncertainty? Are they less likely to make an offer to someone who is unclear about what they want to do next, particularly if they've got a finalist who is crystal clear that they want to be in that job and at that organization?
Definitely. If you think about it, hiring managers are trying to reduce risk. And so if you look at any of the data out there in terms of hiring, oftentimes it's less than 50%. I'm not going to remember the exact statistic, but it's less than 50% that employers feel like they got the right match in a role. And so what hiring managers are trying to do is make sure that there is that good fit, that who they are hiring is going to work out in that role. And if you have somebody who's interviewing who's really confident and understands like this is what I want to be doing next and I'm really going to be engaged in this role, there's more likelihood they're going to move forward with that candidate because it gives them more confidence. They have more trust in that choice of candidate.
Well, let's talk about how to get that clarity about what you want to do next. And you've got 3 steps you take your clients through to answer that question. Let's walk through them one by one, Kathy. The first step is self-reflection. Tell us, what do you mean by this and why is it important?
Well, I'll start also by saying, Mac, that what often happens when people are at a stage where they're like, I need to make a change and I want to go into job search, it's not uncommon for most people to be like, I went to a job board and started looking and just started seeing what appealed to me. And sometimes that's not a bad step in terms of using it to kind of get a sense of, well, what am I curious about now? What is attracting my attention? But if you start applying from that state, you're kind of, you're not doing it with focus and with intention and with alignment to oneself. So self-reflection isn't the place to end by any means, but it's a great place to start in terms of first looking back and exploring what have been your experiences to date. And a key way that is common to do this is to look at peak moments in your past experiences. This can be at work, it could also be in your personal life, and to consider both positive and negative experiences to really uncover what is motivating and meaningful to you about your work. And so you can be exploring and thinking about and unpacking those experiences with keeping in mind things like, what do you value in your work? How do you like to contribute and make an impact? What are the strengths you like to use? What is the type of work that you really love to do and what energizes you? So in that self-reflection, first looking back and kind of seeing what have my past experiences told me about what I might want next. And then you start to look forward. And one of the first places I just start with that is this whole idea of just paying attention to what you're curious about now. It's a great place to start because oftentimes people say, I don't know what I want next. And that's okay. We can often be in that state, but I just like to point people to just start to pay attention to what is catching your interest now and what you're curious about.
How do you recommend organizing this self-reflection? Identifying peak moments seems like a clear step, but are you answering a series of questions? Are you making a list? What has worked with your clients to help them go through this exercise and get answers that will help them answer that question about what to do next?
That's a great point. I do encourage people to do an exercise where you are, I have a worksheet where people kind of can map this out and like take key experiences and really reflect on a series of questions where they're mapping out their answers. And I kind of just rattled off a few areas that you can explore to kind of unpack these experiences. And then I encourage people, Mac, to create a summary document for themselves. I have a blueprint that I offer for people, which may seem really detailed, but it's like, if you have, what's important to you all in one place, it's helpful to have as reference, both in terms of starting to then think about, well, what might be next? What might be paths that interest me? But this becomes your blueprint for also referring back. And, oftentimes when we're in job search, we forget that we are part of the equation. We're kind of like, oh, I just want a job. But it's also like, well, does that job fit you? And does that organization fit you? And so what's helpful about keeping track of this and documenting it and summarizing it for oneself is it becomes your reference tool to evaluate for yourself. Is this job a good fit for me? And that's really what you're looking for is, I'll probably talk about it later, but it's really looking for that match quality between what you're looking for, what you want next, and what is being offered by the organization in this role.
Well, hold that thought. I want to talk more about the blueprint and how to put it together and use it. So stay with us. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Kathy Oneto will continue to share her advice on how to answer the question, what do you want to do next? Because I run a job board at MaxList, people often ask me for informational interviews to talk about their job searches or careers. And in these conversations, I see the difference that setting goals and taking action makes in professional success. In our lives outside of work, having personal goals matters too. Is one of your goals to learn a new language? Babbel can help. Babbel has worked for millions of language learners of all ages. Learn everything you need from vocabulary to culture while holding your own in conversation with anybody. With Babbel, it takes just 10 minutes a day. I've seen the difference Babbel can make in helping me accomplish my goal of speaking Spanish. I use Babbel to keep up the Spanish I learned in classes in Mexico City and Madrid. Without Babbel, I know my Spanish might slip away. This year, get talking with Babbel. Babbel is gifting our listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/dreamjob. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/dreamjob. Spelled BABBEL.com/dreamjob. Babbel.com/dreamjob. Rules and restrictions may apply. Here at MaxList, I talk to job seekers every day. And candidates routinely tell me they're getting online job offers that seem too good to be true. You may have gotten one yourself. The sender asks if you might be interested in an attractive position, say a part-time job at home that pays a six-figure salary. If you reply, you'll likely be asked to share personal information that could lead to identity theft and big financial losses. How did this scammer find you? Data brokers collect and sell your personal information to others, or share it on people's search sites. And criminals have been known to use these records to target victims. But you can protect yourself. Incogni reaches out to data brokers on your behalf, requests removal of your personal data, and deals with any objections. And because many data brokers continue to collect your personal information after they've removed it, Incogni takes care that your data stays off the market by making repeated removal requests. Take back control of your personal data today. Use promo code DREAMJOB to get an exclusive 60% off an Incogni annual plan at incogni.com/dreamjob. We're back in the MaxList studio. I'm talking with Kathy Oneto. She's a consultant, facilitator, and coach. Kathy also hosts the Sustainable Ambition podcast, and she has a new book coming out, Sustainable Ambition: How to Prioritize What Matters to Thrive in Life and Work. Kathy joins us from San Francisco. Now, Kathy, before the break, we were talking about how to answer the question, what do you want to do next? And we talked about the benefits job seekers enjoy, particularly in conversations with hiring managers when they have the answer to that question. And we started walking through 3 steps you encourage your clients to take to get clear about what they want to do either in their next job or perhaps in a new career. And the first step you shared with us was self-reflection. And then we started to talk about blueprints. This is the second step that you encourage job seekers to take. So you've done the self-reflection. You've thought about those peak moments, your strengths, your values, and you've done the analysis and you've created a document. You call it a blueprint. Walk us through what that blueprint looks like, how to put it together, and how it can help someone.
Sure. Well, building on that self-reflection, there's 3 core questions that I like to invite people to explore to create their blueprint and start to identify paths that might be possible for them. So the first question is, what will be satisfying next? The second is, what's my next stretch? And the third is, what do I want to strive for next? So let me just tell you a little bit about each of those. The what will be satisfying next starts to build on some of that early self-reflection. It again goes back to that, what are you curious to explore next? But really, it's also building on when you think about that self-reflection and what that looking back might have told you. I invite people to think about this, just the simple idea of like, what's trending up for you and what's trending down. And so you might think about in those trending up things, like, what do you want to continue doing? What are you curious about next? What might you want to explore and is catching your interest? And trending down might be, what are things that you're kind of done with, that you're kind of like, hey, I'm not as interested in this component anymore. And I mentioned this earlier, really what we're looking for when we're looking for something new is what's called match quality, which is actually an economic term, which is about finding the right fit with one's skills, experiences, interests, and values, and matching that with the requirements and characteristics of a job or organization. And oftentimes I think we only think about one side of that equation. Oh, what am I passionate about? Or, oh, what does the market kind of need? And we're not looking for that match quality. And research really shows, not surprisingly, when we have that match quality, we have higher satisfaction, more motivation, which leads to more success. In terms of what's my next stretch, this is really about, what do you want to how do you want to grow next? What do you want to learn? If really we want our careers to be regenerative and not restrictive, we should be continuing to learn. And I know, continuous learning, of course, has been an important topic over many decades now. But research also shows that it's better to have broader training and keep multiple paths open when we're making transitions at career inflection points. And then, so I don't go too long here, Mac, just really briefly, what do I want to strive for next? That's really about kind of what is your ambition? What's your next aspiration? What's the vision that you might want to aspire to next in your work? What's your next call to adventure? So those are the 3 questions that after self-reflection, I invite people to go a little bit deeper into.
Walk us through how you do this exactly. And how much time does it take, and what do you have in the end? Are you simply sitting down at a desk and writing out your answers to these questions and then turning it into a one-page document or multi-page strategic plan? What do you encourage your clients to do?
Yeah, I offer a one-page regenerative career canvas where people can capture these responses. But this is the type of thing, I think that it can be a combination of things, Mac, which is like sometimes we can boil the ocean and things that needs to be really complex. And really, even just giving ourselves space for 1 hour to reflect on these questions can help us uncover new insights. But the other thing is sometimes by priming ourselves around these questions, it allows our brain to start thinking about these things when we're perhaps out on a walk or we're in the shower. We can prime our brains to start thinking about these questions. And oftentimes we aren't taught to think about our careers in this way. And so by even just priming ourselves to think about these questions, insights might come up for us later. So I really think it's an individual thing in terms of how long this can take or what the process can look like. But ultimately, what you want to get to is from these responses is to start to then ideate on what are possible paths that I might take next? What are roles that I might want to explore and what might be next? So that's what this reflection, going from the self-reflections to starting to create this blueprint, the ultimate output should be, okay, what are potential paths that I might want to explore?
Well, let's talk about that because your third step is to explore your options. So you've done the self-reflection, you've created the blueprint. Now you're ready to move ahead and consider the directions you might take. How do you recommend doing this exactly, Kathy?
So I believe in what Herminia Barra champions in her book, Working Identity, where she really encouraged is all of us to step into action to try to explore these options. And she really says, like, you can't act your way. You need to act your way into a new way of thinking and being. Like, you cannot discover yourself just by introspection. So I do believe the self-reflection and thinking about this personally is very important, but I encourage people to not stop there. And so to your question, Mac, in terms of, well, how do you actually go start to test these things? You can test them in a lot of different ways. One way can just be start to listen to podcasts or read articles on a particular topic, see what your interest level is and whether or not there's energy there. Take a class on something that can be free. There are a lot of free classes out there. That could be free class, a paid class. Do informational interviews, of course, and ask people what their experiences are in those roles. Attend a talk on a topic. So there are a lot of different ways to kind of test things out and to get a sense of like, does this path seem right to me? Or does another path seem like the next step?
And when you talk about paths, Kathy, are you talking about a specific job, a field, organization, all of those things, or something else?
I think it can be all of those things, Mac. I think it could be, am I going to stay in the same industry, but I want to take a different role? Is it that I want to switch industries, but stay in a similar role? Is it that I'm going to mix it up and combine both of those? So it could be different fields. So it could also just be, hey, I'm staying in the same place, but really I want to explore, like, what is it like to move up to the next level? And do I feel like I'm ready for that, or that I'm interested in that, next step on the ladder, if you will?
Often our listeners can fall into one of two groups. They could be a person who is in a position now and they're ready to leave. There's no urgency, but sometime in the next 3-6 months or so, they'd like to make a change. And then there's another group of people who need a job now because they've got bills to pay. Perhaps they've had a layoff or they're in a situation where they do need to make an immediate change. With those two groups in mind, Kathy, how would you recommend applying the 3 steps you've just outlined so people could make the most of the ideas you're sharing here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they can apply to either situation. Certainly, if somebody's in a space where they're making a more significant change, and they have, time, like 6-12 months, like you're saying, there's more runway, right, for that exploration, like you're saying, Mac. I still think that having some sense of like, okay, even if I got laid off or it's a more immediate thing where I need to really get a job, still understanding what is going to be satisfying to you. How do you want to grow next? What's your next aspiration? Having answers to those questions, as well as kind of, again, getting that conviction about like why you're interested in a particular role next can really make you a stronger candidate when you go into those conversations. And so I believe that like spending a little bit of time to really get clear on this. The other point of doing this exercise is really finding your motivation and your energy behind what you want to do. I strongly believe that when we can find our own motivation, that's where sustainable success resides. And we can find more fulfillment and joy and satisfaction in our work when we find that connection. And some of the things I've already talked about can kind of help point people there.
Well, it's been a terrific conversation. Tell us, Kathy, what's next for you?
Well, as you've alluded to, Mac, I have a book coming out later in 2025 in June. And so you've mentioned the title, Sustainable Ambition, How to Prioritize What Matters to Thrive in Life and Work. And I'm also still focused on my own podcast, as you know, which is called the Sustainable Ambition Podcast.
Terrific. Well, I know listeners can learn more about you and your work, both as well as your book and podcast, by visiting your website, sustainableambition.com. And you also invite listeners to connect with you on LinkedIn. When you do reach out to Kathy there, please, I hope you'll mention that you heard her on Find Your Dream Job. Now, Kathy, given all the great advice you've shared today, what's the one thing you want a listener to remember about how to answer the question, what do you want to do next?
Oftentimes, we don't start thinking about this question sooner than we need to. And so what I would encourage people to do is to pay attention to what is happening for them around their work, and also encourage you to always be learning, always be experimenting, and always be taking what I call good risk, things that align to what matter to you.
Next week, our guest will be Leela Singh. She's a leadership, career development, and mindset coach. Leela helps you elevate your career, overcome your limitations, and learn from other successful leaders. She also hosts the weekly podcast, Life Leadership. You apply for a job. You have the experience and the skills the employer wants, but you don't get an offer. Why didn't the hiring manager choose you? Join us next Wednesday when Leela Singh and I talk about 3 ways to make yourself the obvious choice. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job. This show is produced by Max List. Susan Thornton-Hoff schedules our guests and writes our newsletter. Lisa Kislenberry Anderson manages our social media. Our sound engineer and editor is Matt Fiorillo. Dawn Mole creates our transcripts, and our music is by Freddie Trujillo. This is Mac Pritchard. See you next week. Do you want a creative job in 2025? You better understand data. That's because today's employers not only want creativity, they want people who know numbers and can measure results. Find out how data skills can help you get hired, not only for your next job, but throughout your career. Join me, Mac Pritchard, and the Max List team on May 15th at the University of Portland from 5:30 to 8 p.m. We'll be talking about how to get a marketing job in today's uncertain economy and why analytics gives you an edge. This in-person only event in Portland, Oregon is hosted by Max List and the University of Portland School of Business. You'll hear from a panel of top communicators, including Kevin Kinghorn, the Chief Marketing Officer of the Portland Trail Blazers. You'll also have time to network with other creatives and meet representatives from Portland staffing agencies and professional groups. Early bird tickets are $15 through April 30th. Space is limited. Reserve your seat now at maxlist.org/May event. That's maxlist.org/May event. Again, maxlist.org/May event. See you on May 15th.